This is a Western New York Bigfoot Investigation Group podcast. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It contains no wisdom, very few facts, or life changing epiphanies, and is only the opinions, hypotheses, and guesses of the podcast host. If anything of value is learned, it is by mere chance alone. Don't blame me if you suddenly think about something or anything in a way you hadn't thought about it before. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Bigfoot Atheist Inquiry Sasquatch Random Line. How's everybody doing? Oh, I got a message. Hang on. What did I? Oh, okay, cool. All right. That was a message from Leon. Well, hello, everybody. Yeah, thanks for joining. And I've got, I still got time on my hands, right? So I guess launching the newish channel. I guess that's good because I got time to actually put some stuff up here for right now. Because I'm still, waiting on the Jeep. Still in the shop. Hopefully they'll be calling me today by the end of the day, telling me it's ready. I hope. I just can't really say much about it because, the way they're letting me just pay when I can instead of upfront. I just really can't make demands on them. They know that I need it to go to work. But there's paying customers. They get a lot of business, and there's paying customers that pay right up front that I understand take priority over a guy that can only pay a little at a time. So anyway, but I'm doing this, and this is just you saw the title, Why the General Public Thinks We're All Nuts. And this is just really my response to some of the things I've been seeing recently. And we're just going to talk about them. And maybe somebody might join me. He's just waking up, so he may pop on, he may not, and that's okay. So let's get around to saying hello here. Grasshopper, he's the first one in. Eh? Yeah, hi, Grass. Thanks for joining us. Joe Dryden. Hey, thank you, Joe. Good to see you. Jen, howdy. Jen is now my wrench. I did that before. I don't know if it lasts. I'm going to have to find a way to just permanently put you in there, Jen. And I think after the show, after the show's over, when I'm able to access the StreamYard chat, I don't know. I got to figure out a way to do it permanently because I did it once before for another show. I think I made you a wrench, but for some reason it didn't stick maybe, and I got to keep doing it or something. But anyway, so there you are. So thanks for being here, Jen. Kevin Harder, how you doing, sir? Welcome. Brian and Chewy go hiking. Hello, man. Yeah, how you doing, brother? Good to see you. And let's see, who else is here? Brandy. Hey, Brandy. She says, hello, everyone listening. Jen, I hope you're healing up. Yeah, that's cool. All right. So far, that's who we got in here. So looking around, man. And look, I know the other day, and I'm going to cover this in a little bit, a little more on the topic of it. But, the other day, I was Yeah, I know I was a little heated the other day when Jeff did his show, but yeah, well, all of us have like passions about something, and there were some things I could have said better probably, and there were probably some things I should have said on top of that. So, but I didn't, and I may say them today. Uh, oh, Jed's new channel, so probably have to reset that. No, I mean the other day when I actually did a show on this, the current channel right here, I thought I had made you a wrench then, but maybe I have to do it. Hey, Brent, the tall ones. Um, I didn't know that you were gonna. Hey, Brent. Actually, um, you know what? All right, I wasn't gonna do this, but um, hang on. Let me let me do this because I don't want to get this all crazy and shit. Um, so there you go. All right, Brent. I sent you a link in case you want to pop on. I sent you a message. I don't know if you saw it or not. And I don't know. It's pretty early where you're at right now. What is it? 12, 11, 10, 9. It's only 9 o'clock where you're at. So if you're too sleepy or whatever, and you just want to hang and chat and listen, that's fine. I just thought maybe you might have some insights into this whole thing. But uh, anyway, yeah. So first thing I kind of want to cover is something. Let's see. Um, let's see. Who's this? This is somebody new that I don't know whether they're legit or not. Christ brings a sword. Says, "Are you a skeptic or a believer of Bigfoot? I know there are creatures intelligent that we don't understand living underground." Well, I don't know anything about that. Christ brings a sword. Um, but no, I am a skeptic, and no, I accept that Bigfoot is a living biological creature because I think I saw one. And everybody here in this chat knows of my encounter story, which I have no evidence of, and therefore cannot expect anybody to believe. But no, I'm a skeptic about all this other stuff everybody's saying about this thing that may be what I saw. So yeah, so I've already gone into that explanation. Everybody understands what the whole title "Bigfoot Atheist" really means now. Um, oh, that's cool, Brent. Uh, got to head to work in a little bit. Oh, that's cool, man. Yeah, I wish I was too myself, man. So, um, yeah, Kevin's just jumping right on into it, man. Kevin says so disappointing to see the wide opening guys promoting the Chris Knoll dogma without any polite discussion of the problems. Yeah, I mean that was one thing I was going to start out with. Yes, Christopher did appear on Wide Open Research the other day, yesterday, I guess it was, in the thing, and he did. They did go over, of course, the porcupine video, and you know what? When it comes to as far as the open research guys, I don't have anything. I don't have anything to say about that or against the podcast or the hosts themselves. I mean, they were professional in the way that they interviewed him. In my opinion, they were professional at least in that. And I mean, curiosity. I can't fault anybody for curiosity. Now, I would have handled it differently than they did, but um, that's just me, and I don't expect anybody to do things the same way I would do them when it comes to that. Um, so fair enough. I just would have asked a whole lot of questions and probably different questions than they did. Now, I got the impression, and I don't want to like say that I'm reading into the mind of somebody else because I cannot do that, but I got the impression at one point that one of them, one of the hosts, wasn't totally buying into the whole thing because there was an actual point at one point in the where he actually said, "Well, in this part right here, it really does look like a porcupine." So um, there you have it. And I would have actually, so it's really no reflection on the podcast itself or those hosts, but it does show, at least to me, that Chris is like sunk in his bias, and there is absolutely no freaking moving him out of that bias, no matter how much evidence you can come up with, no matter how many people independently can look at that video, compare it to other videos of porcupines, and see it's exactly the same thing. It's a porcupine. But you're not going to get him budged from his position. Now, hey, welcome to Mr. Lee 3PO. How you doing? Um, um, who else? I thought I saw somebody else show up here. Oh, maybe not. Anyway, but that just goes to show you're not going to budge him. He's going to keep spouting it. Now, you might say that they, for that reason, they should not promote, or you can wonder why they would have somebody on that is like that. And well, I can't really say anything to that, but um, it just goes to show you that he is sunk in that confirmation bias. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what. Um, it's no matter what you say or what you show him, and so I mean, pretty much, um, that really destroys any credibility, in my opinion, as far as I'm concerned. Um, because you just, what, how can you deal with that? And I can't say that, technically, again, technically, I'm not. I can't. You can't. I can't put Chris Noel into the category of hoaxer technically, um, because have that would require me to prove that he actually knows that what he's seeing is a porcupine, um, and yet refuses to say it. That would actually cause me to have to prove that, and I can't prove that. So, which leaves me with he actually believes what he is seeing there is, what he says it is. So, and that's all I can say is that he believes it, and you're not gonna freaking, no matter how much you show him, it's a porcupine. He's not going to, and so, for some of the people that want to lump Chris in with these guys out here that are actually just fucking hoaxing, I don't believe you can fairly do that, because I do believe Chris really has his bias, and he's just sunk in his bias. That's it. So technically, I think it's unfair to call him a hoaxer. Um, but he is sunk in that bias, and he refuses to back down on the fact that a porcupine is a porcupine in a tree and not a Bigfoot. Now, what does that do for the rest of the research? I don't know, man. I mean, a lot of people can say, well, that's still really just, it really doesn't do any, but, people can recognize that, I think. I mean, does it do damage per se to people that are doing what we would call legit research or scientific research? I guess if you let it, I mean, I don't know how to think about that way. if you were somebody new coming into the subject and the first person you stumbled upon was Chris, well, you wouldn't know it was doing, if it was their first time and that's the first guy you see, what damage is there to do? You would just listen to what he has to say if that's your first exposure and go, oh. But then if you looked around and saw some of the other people who are not, sunk into some kind of bias, um, you can make your judgment else otherwise. And I don't know if I'm putting that succinctly or not, but anyway, yeah, I think the most amazing thing was that I saw was, to me, because I don't know, I've never met him. I've never met him. I've never interacted with him really, other than one comment that I made when he first came out with the porcupine video. That, have you showed this to a wildlife biologist or anybody? Because it looks like a porcupine to me. And he responded with, do you really think a wildlife biologist would be open to Bigfoot? Which is really not the question. It's like Leon said, do you want to know what you're looking at or don't you? And that's the approach there, is, do you want to know what you're looking at or don't you? If you do, why be afraid to send it to or show it to a wild biologist or many wild biologists and see what the common consensus is among those wildlife biologists? If they all say, you got a porcupine in a tree there, fella, then it's a porcupine. That's more likely, it's a porcupine, dude. You can see it, right? I'm not a wildlife biologist, and I could see in that video, when I compare it to every other videos of porcupines climbing trees, it's the exact same movements, the exact same thing. It's a porcupine. But he doesn't really want to do that. He wants to believe that it's a Bigfoot. So, I mean, there's not much you can do about that. I'm trying to look at comments too, folks, because I don't want to miss any of your good ones. And you all make pretty good ones. Yeah, Mr. Lee, I think that's a common consensus among most of us who are, at least charitable about some things. Yeah, I don't think he's intentionally trying. He believes it, and that's just sad, really. Um, it's not a heinous crime. It's just sad. Um, and you're right, Brent. I don't think that his ego will let him ever admit um, that there's a, porcupine in that tree. Christ brings a sword. Look, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to admit this openly right now. So far, Christ brings a sword. You've been asking some pretty legitimate things, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I figured this has got to be a troll at first, but apparently you're not. You're asking some valid questions. Is there a relationship between UFO sightings and Bigfoot? Christ, could they be related? He asks, or she. Um, all I can say is that I have absolutely seen no evidence that points to that. Period. There's no solid evidence that there's any relationship between UFOs, and whether you want to call that, think that UFO just automatically means some alien life or whatever. There's no evidence for it. That's all I can say about that. I've not seen any, so no solid evidence of that. Hey, Danny Staten's in the house. Hey, Danny. Danny says, greetings from South Carolina. Um, that's cool. Um, yeah, okay. I'm just going to do this because it tickled my funny bone a little bit. Kevin says that, he says, Noel really offended me by declining to listen to science-based critique from friendly sources. And then he went on to explain, uh, I am perhaps too easily offended. I am an open wound. Well, maybe, man. Maybe. I wouldn't be offended by that. I mean, because he declined my suggestion that he, let some wildlife biologists look at it. And, you know, I, uh, yeah, see, I don't know enough about that grasshopper to make a comment on that. Um, I don't think it has any reflection to do with the podcast. I don't have anything against these podcasts or the podcast hosts for having certain people on. I mean, I don't have anything against them. Um, it's just that, I mean, it's up to me to take whoever the guest is, and decide whether, okay, it's legit or this guy's just blowing, or whoever is blowing smoke up my ass. As far as Tom Stewart goes, I'm not real familiar with Tom Stewart. I know who he is, et cetera, et cetera. I know there was a video out there of them like dynamiting seals or something, which if that's if that I don't like that. That's pretty effed up. But other than that, I don't really have anything to say about that. So um, yeah, that's a pretty big skunk, I would say. Um, Not going to say that you didn't witness a skunk that, I mean, from nose to tail, I mean, probably could easily, maybe there's one. I've seen a couple of skunks. I mean, they're not huge, but I would say that if you're talking about 4 foot in length, without a tail, not including the tail, okay, I can't say that's not possible. I believe you saw a 4 foot skunk in your yard. Yeah. I'm glad I haven't had that many run-ins with skunks personally. I can remember one very vividly. It was oh god, it was my first marriage actually. Um, and everybody knows, I believe here, that I've been married 3 times. But yeah, we were in some cabin somewhere. I don't remember exactly where it was. Probably in Virginia somewhere, maybe. But we were in a cabin and we were sitting out on the little porch of this cabin. And I look to my right and there's this skunk, man. And, they're nearsighted as hell, right? From what I understand, right? So here he comes. We're sitting there and here he comes ambling up towards the porch, not even like registering that we're there, and starts actually coming up onto the porch. And that's when I freaked. Right? I said, skunk! And I jumped up and ran inside, and the door slammed. I wasn't even worried about my wife getting sprayed. Nothing, man. I was worried about me getting sprayed because I was actually the closest to it. I would have been the first one the skunk had to recognize was there once he got there. And I just jumped up, skunk, and ran inside the cabin. Yeah. She was mad. She was like, "You just left me out there with a skunk." I'm like, "Yeah, I wasn't getting sprayed, man. No way in hell." Uh-uh. So, um, yeah, I think that's a done deal, Mister Lee. I can't speak for Brent, and nor would I ever. But I suppose if more came out, then I guess there would be more pushback. But I think it's pretty much a done deal. I think we all know who Mark Zasky is, and what he's actually like, and etc. And so, you know, and there's shows and videos out there that if somebody doesn't know, they can easily see. Yeah, thank you, Brent. Yeah, he said not much more to say. about Zasky. Yeah. Um, hey, Lost Kirsten's little. Oh, sorry about that. It just did not want to all come out all at once. The Lost Cryptids Conservatory. Thank you for showing up. Good morning, um, or good afternoon, since that's what it is here. Um, uh, let's see. Christ Brings a Sword says skunks get 18 inches in length, according to Wikipedia. Okay. Well, then 4 foot's a pretty huge skunk, isn't it? 4 feet nose to tail. Well, let's see. What is 18 inches? 18 inches, a foot and a half, right? So, yeah, that's a pretty big freaking skunk. And that's possible. I guess that's would be possible in nature. I mean, some animals, it has been, uh, observed that there is gigantism in some species sometimes for whatever reason. So maybe you ran across a freaking big ass skunk. I mean, that's not hard to believe. Now, if you said, you saw like a freaking skunk the size of an elephant, then I would, or the size of a Saint Bernard or something like that, then yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily go, no, you didn't see that big of a skunk. But I would kind of need a little more to go on, uh, evidence wise, that there's a skunk that big. But yeah, 4 foot skunk, yeah, could, there could be a reason why it got that big. Yeah, who knows? I have no doubt that that's what you saw. Uh, Yeah, right, Mr. Lee. Leaving wife on porch with skunk grounds for divorce. Yes. Yeah, that wasn't the ultimate reason for our divorce, though, was the skunk. Uh, Kevin, and don't forget Bergman's rule with skunk sizes. I'm not familiar with that, Kevin. So I will admit. So you'd have to. I mean, I've heard of Bergman's rule, but you'd have to refresh my memory of what it is. Uh, um, Yeah, I mean, I study evolution and stuff like that. Not formally. I mean, I study it by reading everything and looking into everything I can about it. But some of the precursors, some of the ancestors of skunks may have been actually rather large, and yeah, I'm sure they were. But, but yeah, I'm not. Yeah, grasshopper. Did I say hello to you? Well, welcome anyway. If I didn't, I'm sorry I missed you. I'm not awake enough to contemplate my navel, let alone shaking news. Well, this isn't what I would call shaking news, but it's just my thoughts on some of the stuff and why I think, in general, the public thinks we're all nuts. Um, oh, yeah. Northern colder climate, larger sizes of the same species, Bergens. Yeah, there is that. Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, yeah. That's along that lines now that I'm thinking. Yeah, it does have to do with the larger size, colder climates, etc. Um, which also does not really explain why, because there were times where the Neanderthals lived in some extremely cold climates, but there's no fossil evidence of them actually being any larger ever, no matter what the environmental conditions were. So I don't know how that really, but it apparently does happen, um, in nature with certain species. Um, yeah, right, Brian. Yeah, seeing the quills gives it away a tad in his videos. You would think so. Yes, you would think so. Um, exactly. But anyway, but that's what I'm looking at with that. And I mean, that could be one of the reasons, why I think, that, in general, that, I mean, come on, because let's face it, guys, it's not easy. If it's really happened to you, it's actually not easy to say, or admit to anyone that you think you saw a Bigfoot. That in and of itself, a good many people would think is nuts, right? But, you know, that in and of itself is. But then there's all that you add all this other stuff in, and anybody outside of the interest of it would be like, people are all crazy, man. I mean, imagine if the first thing you exposed to in Bigfoot is like, okay, and I will go into this now. Jeff's show the other day, I think Jeff did a great job. I think Jeff did what Jeff did was fair, in what he did on his show, Coffee Time. I kind of got a little triggered, and had to leave the show, but that's okay. But I think what Jeff did was fair enough. Um, and when he was doing his show with Brian King Sharp, and the two of them were discussing an article, not anyone in particular, because at the time neither one of them knew who this person was. That there was just a first name, and that was it. So they didn't even know who the article was about. They were just discussing the article and what it contained. Now, they found out later who it was, and that person called Jeff, and Jeff said, "Hey, you know what? Come on the show." And Jeff invited him on the show, and he willingly went. Now, we all know that I just don't buy a bit of it. Why don't I? Because there's no evidence for it, Um, and that's that. People looking at that, makes me reluctant to ever tell my encounter to anybody. I'm surprised that people really do tell their encounters, and that's because of all this crap, man. Um, it's not because of us people who are critically thinking and objectively thinking and want to figure out what's really happening. Um, that's not what's stopping. It's because that, like I said, 90, I think, and I don't have, this may not be an accurate number, but I think 95% of the public, because I think it's only 18% of the whole population or something like that actually gives a possibility to Bigfoot existing, right? Or believes that they exist. So, I mean, I'm, 95% from what I say, you know, people aren't going to believe that you even encountered a Bigfoot, much less all the narrative that people are putting out there, like Claude did. Which it's not just him. Personally, my own opinion is that he's feeding off of all the stuff that he hears. And I'm not trying to say that he doesn't think that he experienced what he said. I'm not going to say that. But I'm not required to believe that all of it's true because there's no evidence for it, man. Um, just like nobody has to believe me, Jay, um, Jeff, or anybody who's had an encounter with Bigfoot because we can't prove it. And I got a little bit to say about that later about falsifiability of claims, but um, but to hear some of these people, they've got it all figured out, and that's where I make a distinction between people and their encounters and their narratives. It's one thing to have a Bigfoot encounter and tell about it. This is what it looked like. This is what I was doing when it happened. This is basically the area it was in. This is the activity I was engaged in when this happened. And if they got a good look at it, this is what it looked like, etc. There is a world of difference between that And I've got Bigfoot all figured out. And this is what Bigfoot does. And this was what Bigfoot's capable of. And Bigfoot mind speaks to me. And Bigfoot disappears into portals and he cloaks and all this other stuff. There's a world of difference between that and accepting that than accepting somebody telling about just an encounter that they had. I make that distinction for myself. Now, everybody doesn't have to go along those guidelines the same as I do, but that's the way I look at it. Big world of difference. I got no problem. Somebody wants to tell me they saw a Bigfoot, great, because I saw one too, or at least I think it did. That's what Rasta looks like to me. Morphologically, it was a big hairy hominin. What are we calling a big hairy hominin in this country? We're calling it Bigfoot or Sasquatch. So if you've got something like that, then yeah, okay, tell me about it. Because if you really did see one, maybe I can draw some parallels to what I saw, and that would put me a long way closer to going, okay, he really is a Sasquatch, and not something else that I don't know about, right? Like, I don't know, some weirdly troglodytic human being or whatever. But so yeah, but when you get out there with the Scott Carpenters and Tom Cantrells and Sue Walkers of the world who want to tell me that, oh, this is what Bigfoot does, is from where, all this other stuff with absolutely no evidence, then I got to draw a line and go, look, sorry. You're just not making it, man. You're just not making it. And it's making all of us, look crazy. Look crazy. It's like, so when people see all this stuff about this just shit that is just not proven at all in any way and is unfalsifiable, just somebody like me or Jay or Jeff or anybody else saying we saw a Bigfoot. Oh, you mean that thing people were talking about, the cloaks and blah 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 and this and that and everything else, and then you're left with either no conversation, or you got to then go into, well, I don't believe that, and you got to tell them about the naturalistic side, but they're not even going to be willing to probably listen to that point, because they've already heard all this other crazy crap that a good majority is being put out there. So that's the issue that I take, man, with that kind of stuff, man. Um, you know, um, when things are unfalsifiable, it's hard to even consider them. And I know some people go, well, there are people that I'm pretty sure will probably be like, whoa, unfalsifiable, that means it's got to be true. No, that's not what that means. And I'm going to pull it up here. I'm going to read this because it makes sense. And there is an exception here, which I don't know. But let me share this, and I'll just read it right off the thing. Share screen. That one. Share. So what it says here is unfalsifiability, which is also known as untestability. Okay. Description of I can't even say it now, right? Unfalsifiability. Confidently asserting that a theory or hypothesis is true or false, even though the theory or hypothesis cannot possibly be contradicted by a observation or outcome of any physical experiment, usually without strong evidence or good reasons. So making unfalsifiable claims is a way to leave the realm of rational discourse, since unfalsifiability claims are often faith-based and not founded on evidence and reason. Now, the logical form they give here is X is true. when X cannot possibly be demonstrated to be false. Example of that is, and I love this example that they use, I have tiny invisible unicorns living in my anus. Unfortunately, these cannot be detected by any kind of scientific equipment. Okay, it's right there. You can't prove it. And the explanation, while it may actually be a fact that tiny, invisible, mythological creatures are occupying this person's opening at the lower end of the alimentary canal, it is a theory that is constructed so it cannot be falsified in any way, therefore should not be seriously considered without significant evidence. So that's what unfalsifiability is. Now, not everything that is unfalsifiable is fallacious, what they say. Um, and that's where the exception comes in. They say, and I'll accept this, all unfalsifiable claims are not fallacious. They are just unfalsifiable, which means they fall in that definition. As long as proper skepticism is retained and proper evidence is given, it could be a legitimate form of reasoning. So, where does that leave some encounters, right? Well, my claim is an unfalsifiable claim, really. It would fall into that, wouldn't it? Right? However, if someone were to go out there and see the same thing that I saw, um, then that's evidence, right? So things like that one that they showed, that's unfalsifiable. If I said right now that I have a little gnome underneath my desk that likes to chew on my toenails, um, but every time somebody tries to look under the desk to see him, he disappears. It's an unfalsifiable claim, you know. And so much of these narratives that people put out there are totally unfalsifiable, you know, and so therefore don't have good reason to believe it. You probably shouldn't. Um, oh, absolute. Hang on. Yeah, has been proven to be, the alien autopsy thing. Um, Christ brings a sword. It's not just probably fake; it is fake. Yeah, yeah. Um, right, Kevin. Yeah, Kevin says there's a large category of valid hypotheses which are not also not falsifiable or unfalsifiable. Um, yeah, like, I have hypotheses, and that's just based on observation, right, of what I saw. If what I saw is a Sasquatch um, that was stalking that deer, then I can make some hypotheses. I can come to a hypothesis about it based on that observation, but I can't say yet that that's a fact because I'd have to be able to test that hypothesis, right? So if I could say, like, whatever, you know, from what I saw, it looks like it's a possibility that it belongs somewhere. It's a possibility that it belongs somewhere, like maybe in the Australopithecine genus, that came from there, came from the same common ancestor that we did. But I'd have to be able to test that hypothesis um, and disprove it, which is what you'd want to do, is try to disprove it. If you can't disprove that hypothesis, then you keep going with that hypothesis. Um, Now, see, since I am not a scientist, I'm not exactly sure how to test that hypothesis unless I could come up with something like fossils or, I mean, so, but you get my point. I can come up with that hypothesis, but there's no way in hell right now that I can state that hypothesis as a fact. I'm not going to run around going, no, because based on what I saw, that thing's an Australopithecine, or it's descended from Australopithecines, or it's descended from Homo erectus or Homo habilis or whatever. I don't have any evidence of that right now. It could be a hypothesis, but that's all. And it might not be a good hypothesis, you know. Um, so, you have to have evidence, man. That's what it all comes down to. And that's why I put it. And that's why I harp on it. You got to have some evidence, man. And that evidence has to point to one conclusion in order to be evidence of what you think it is evidence of. I mean, if it's evidence of Bigfoot, it's going to point to Bigfoot and Bigfoot alone. That you can't come to any other possible conclusion. That's why the again, as we keep talking about freaking stick structures and all this, there's a dozen other conclusions you can come to. Unless you were to find something in conjunction with those that only points to the fact that this has to have been done by this thing, you got to come up with other evidence, because other than that, it could be bushcrafters, it could be just natural, it could just, it could just be people playing around, hoaxing it, whatever. Um, yeah, right. That is how science works, Kevin. Is yeah, figuring out ways to make a hypothesis into a falsifiable proposition. Right. You got um, to be able to falsify it, to even consider whether it's proper to even, because if you can't, if it's unfalsifiable, then there's no reason to even consider. Because if you can't do tests on it, you can't. There's no way in hell to test any of it. What do you got? Then you're just going on faith, man. It's like, so I mean, there's a whole lot that I have to like rethink in my quest for answers about, and really this whole thing isn't just, it started out as a kid, wanting to find out whether Bigfoot was real or not, to now my whole thing is a quest to find out answers to a particular incident now, because the other part's gone. I'm firmly saying, yeah, they're out there, man. I'm not firmly saying that. I can't firmly say that that 7.5 foot tall hairy thing that I saw stalking that deer was absolutely a Sasquatch. I don't, most people go, listen to what you just said. It has to be a Sasquatch. Right. That's what I can think. It has to be a Sasquatch. But can I prove it's a Sasquatch? Can I prove it that it's a Sasquatch? And I don't mean to prove it to anybody else. That would be great. But prove it to myself that that's exactly what it was. You know, um, I'm going with that because, well, I know it wasn't some other animal. It wasn't a deer. It wasn't. It wasn't. Obviously, it wasn't not a deer, because that would make no sense whatsoever. A deer standing bipedally stalking another deer. I don't know. So, but if you want to come to something closer that could be possible that people have mistaken for Bigfoot, a black bear, it was not a black bear. I know that. Um, and I've pretty much covered the rest of it to my satisfaction. As in somebody hoaxing me? Nah, that's even a bigger stretch, man. That somebody would be hoaxing me because they would have to know that I'm, in particular, I'm the one they're hoaxing. So they would have to know that I was going to be out there that particular day. Um, what time I was going to be there exactly. They would have to have enlisted the aid of a deer to help them in their hoax. So I could rule that one out automatically. Um, unless you can find me a 7.5 foot hairy guy running around the woods in a ghillie suit, yeah, that one I'm ruling out too. So, but still, even with all that, I'm not prepared 100%. You know, to until I can prove it. You know, until I can prove it. I mean, I know what was there and I know what everything that happened. But was Rasta, that thing right there, was that actually a Sasquatch? Was it a Bigfoot? Was it a Bigfoot? So, but and this is the only place, of course, again, going into what I said, everybody else, in the common public would think I'm talking crazy right now. Because I'm talking about Bigfoot, period. And they've already, they've probably already, and especially if they've already seen all these other people that are a hell of a lot well known than me in the Bigfoot community, right? Um, like Chris. I mean, he's got notoriety in the Bigfoot community. He's wrote books, you know, uh, all this other stuff. Um, so when you come up against that, somebody who, again, I will reiterate it so nobody misunderstands me, that Chris is not considered by myself to be a hoaxer. He's just so deep into confirmation bias, he can't see past it. Um, but still, and then you have the other people like when on Jeff's show that, whether he thinks that he's experienced, I'm not even going to call him a hoaxer because, again, that would have to be me proving that he doesn't believe everything that he said, you know, and I can't do that. So, but still, without absolutely any evidence whatsoever, it sounds crazy, man, and it's just not believable. Um, that's me. Okay, I will not commit to saying that nobody should believe it. I mean, people believe what they believe. Period. Um, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that especially the people that follow him that he follows, that have the exact same outlook. You know, Sue Walker talking about how they're telepathic and you know they're known to this star nation that she telepathic with also, and that they love pot, and it's like, wow. Yeah, yeah, there you go. There you go, Danny. So did you see the interview with the Big Show? He has 18-inch feet and loves walking around barefoot to leave giant footprints. He's 7'1". Yeah, yeah. Now I'm not saying there's no examples of anybody that ever has gotten to that size. We got very large basketball players. Only thing about the Bigfoot, unless he has flat feet, which is a possibility, I don't know, but that would be one way to tell right there that it's just a huge human footprint, is if it has an arch. You know, now there could be, and there probably are. I've been told this, so I don't know, but 100%. But It's been expressed to me that there are human beings that can have flat feet, no arch is seen. So that's another thing you'd have to take into consideration if you come across some tracks. And I love tracks, man. I think tracks, I'm with Leon. Tracks are facts, man. As long as you can rule out every other thing that they could be, tracks are facts. And that's one of them. You would have to rule out that, hey, there's not a 7 foot guy or whatever, somebody with, very large feet, flat feet in the area, right? You would have to be able to rule that out, I think. But that's just me. Now, I don't think that's common, of course, so it should be easily ruled out if you really have Bigfoot footprints. That one should be easy to rule out. Um, and if you know enough about them, and I'm not claiming that I do, it should be easy to rule out hoaxing a track. Um, so, yeah, well, I would agree with that. Most hoaxers know they're hoaxing when they're hoaxing. Like, for example, the guy in the video that throws the rock, bends over, picks something up from the ground, and then throws a rock, which is what he picked up, at a tree. And then says, "Oh, I don't know what that was." Yeah, you do. You threw a rock at a tree, dude. Um, Kaiju. Good question, man. You come up with such good questions. I'd have to think about this one. Says Joe, what kind of evidence could you find without seeing something? In other words, without seeing that individual again, or finding a body part would convince you that what you saw? Well, I don't need to be convinced of what I saw was real, okay, because it was real. You mean convinced that it's actually was a Bigfoot? Well, there's not going to be much. And look, to be honest, I'm pretty convinced already, right? I'm pretty convinced already that Rasta's has to be what's considered a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot. But there's always going to be just that little bit that's going to say, well, you can't be 100% sure because you don't have any evidence. But I'm pretty convinced that what he is. But what could I find out there without actually seeing him? Well, I mean, there's lots of stuff I could find that would convince me that, say, hey, he's still in the area, right? Some tracks, some really good tracks, man, from his feet would convince me that he's still active in the area and that he's a Sasquatch, I guess, or at least that his feet his feet conform with what people have called real Sasquatch tracks. Experts in the foot morphology like Jeff Meldrum, and there's a couple others. There's not just him. I just can't think of any names right off my top of my head. But hey, got my buddy. Hey, Leon, how's it going?
I'm still waking up. I'm having a slow day today, but
Oh,
I've been
that's all
listening.
right.
I've been just trying
So
to
that's
get myself
good.
some energy so I can come online.
Yeah, I'm just trying to answer Kaiju's question here. And it's a little hard to with the way, but I think I'm doing an okay job, right, Kaiju? So yeah, if I were to find some hair, that kind of conforms to what's matches that what people are saying are Bigfoot hairs, something that looks like it could be, but it's not, but it's primate, but it's not really a known, all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, that would go like, well, shit, man, that he is. And like I said, I'm actually, I got to be honest about it and say I'm pretty convinced that Rasta is a Sasquatch or what we call Bigfoot. But there's always going to be just that little bit since I don't have any other evidence that's going to say,
But you need to
is
see
that what he
again.
really is? So,
Another way of answering Kaiju's question is the problem with when you're walking in the forest, you have to understand the forest area that you're studying, because then
mhm,
you'll see something that's abnormal. For instance, you're at home right now. Everyone's at home right now. You go to work, you come back, and there's a stick on your coffee table from outside, a branch. That's going to alert you. Well, what the heck's this branch doing there? Because you're familiar
Right.
with your environment of your house, and you know what's supposed to be there and what seems off. Because we're dealing with a topic that we don't have much information about, especially tracking them down, you have to, at least this is one way I do it, is I have 3 different sites when I get to get out there. But I'm very familiar with what's normal, what the forest looks like in those sites. And so stuff that sticks out, for instance, you're walking through the forest, you've been in that forest for a while, like say every weekend, you go up there and check it out, and you come across a pop can, you know there's something different just by seeing a
Right.
pop can in the forest. So the idea is try to find things that make you kind of go, and then you kind of analyze the situation to find out what that is. And so when I came across all those so-called Sasquatch structures, and then I posted online when I first came on, and I asked everybody, is this what you're talking about, including Christopher Noel? Oh yes, those are definitely Sasquatch structures, right?
Yeah.
Well, I take that under advisement, but I have to still do my research. So, okay, so why is it that all these structures are in this location, but not in any of my other locations? Or I might find 1 or 2. This other place had like 16 of them. And so doing that video on Global Whitetail looking for Sasquatch, or I think it's labeled as my big fear, which was, what if I'm wrong? And I have to admit when I'm wrong to my viewers. And so I go in, but again, I'm used to walking around the forest. Also, I've come across all these structures that are in the bush. And I'm getting reaffirmed by the narration online that these all represent Sasquatch. So I think, man, I've hit the gold mine here, according to the online narrative. But what I'm not knowing is that, I think it was Neil Tyson saying, one of the biggest mysteries about us is to think you know more about a topic and not know that you don't know anything about the topic. Is some phrase like that. I can't remember right now because my brain's slow this morning. And that's the problem is you only have a reference point, like Kaiju, if he's in his own skin and Brent's in their own skin, they go into the bush. Well, you only have your resources of what you think. And because you're curious, then when you got a curious question, then that's where your brain's ideas of what you think can end up, especially if you're looking for Sasquatch and wanting to find Sasquatch evidence. You said that to your mind with intent, then your mind starts pointing out stuff like that. Like I remember when I first started out looking for tracks, I realized that my brain is not used to looking for big tracks. It's used to looking for human tracks. I had to get that. It sounds kind of weird, but I had to get that brain of mine to focus on look for abnormally large tracks. And as soon as I started practicing that technique, because you will walk over and see a track, but your brain, you may just walk right over a track and it looks like a footprint. Your brain goes, oh, a footprint. And you just walk by. But it doesn't register to you, it's a 24-inch footprint. You know what I mean? Because your brain goes down to the file, so it looks like, and it's pattern orientated. And so it goes through the file, hits what the image of a footprint is, and you see a footprint. But, and I did that, like, no kidding, because I used, up in my area here, we have a lot of sandbanks because we have lodgepole pine. I have a lot of pine here, so they grow a lot of mineral. And so I would drive very slowly along the sides of the dirt roads or whatever. And then I would come back the opposite direction at the end of the day because the sun reflects differently on the sides. And I remember walking right by this one area a couple of times, and it didn't register me at all. And there was a clear track right in the embankment like this. And the toes all went into the hole. You could see the heel mark. And I think the track was close to 18 inches long or something like that. Mm-hmm. That's basically twice the size of my foot. But the funny thing was I kept saying to myself, how could I not notice that? And I realized that my brain's so wired in looking. I know what a track looks like, but I don't know what a Sasquatch track looks like.
Right.
If you learn yourself in the environment and you start seeing things that don't fit what we normally have seen in the environment, remember, every time you walk into the bush, like Brent, when he's into or even Steve from Curious Cryptid, when they go up into the Pacific Northwest in Washington, when they first went in there, all the imagery is starting to layer itself in these files in your brain. And so the more Brent goes into those locations and Steve goes into those locations, they know what their brain already has the information, and they start seeing patterns or the brain starts collecting the patterns of the environment. But then they come across something that's strange or bizarre, or audio that's strange and bizarre. That's why you have to understand that, look, we're outgunned. It's not that people are not intelligent, stupid. It's just that we're not educated about things that other options could possibly be out there, instead of just, could it be a Sasquatch? Yes. Cautionary note on it. It could be, doesn't mean it isn't. So make sure you don't use academia. Remember, the topic is Sasquatch. And you want a clear picture, like a glass of water. The water is the topic in the glass. You don't want to start letting your brain start taking ideas, start putting food coloring, put each of those ideas or concepts into the glass of water, because the water becomes murkier and murkier and murkier. Pretty soon you got brown in the water. You can't even decipher it. Once that happens, because your brain's like a sponge, it can't help but put it all in your head. And now all you have is soup in your head. You can't define anything because you haven't vetted anything from the beginning.
Right.
One thing I mentioned in my videos is I need to find a track. If I'm in an area, I can sit there and say, this is Sasquatch and that's Sasquatch, but I need to find a track, because tracks are going to tell me that they're in the area. You and I, Joe, are old farts. We're fat. We don't have the springness of our young chicken like Tristan does, or Brent. They have more capacity to get through the bush and stuff like that. But you have to find valid evidence, not hopeful evidence. No, and the weird thing about science, as much as people think, well, there are just skeptics and all that, you are rewarded greatly if you prove something is wrong with somebody else, because it moves the topic farther down with good solid evidence that more people, again, scientific method is the idea is down here, more evidence is built on. Everyone can see how you got to that evidence. Right. And it's a big pat on your back. Oh God, I was wrong about that. You were totally right about that. And that's why I appreciate Thomas too, is he will bend the knee if presented with, and that's what a good skeptic does. When valid evidence comes, you are flexible enough to bow your knee instead of your ego, keeping your ego up. Well, how do you know? How do you know? How do you know? Because like you said, that some of the guests that we see sometimes online they're stuck in the narration of what they're hoping it to be, but they're not giving any solid evidence. So just getting back to the beginning idea of Tristan, when you're going into the forest, make sure you know your forest area. Grid it out. And what that means is you have to take a line. But in forestry, we used to have these little belly packs, and they had thread on them. And you used to walk an acre that way, an acre that way on a compass bearing. So you squared it off. And then you walked in the center of it. And you got a very good picture of, waterways, types of trees in that area. And at the same time you're doing that is you're looking for evidence that's solid to begin with. First of all, how do you even know they're in the area? Well, I heard a noise. Well, that's not good enough. I need something tactile, something. Leon, what do you think about this? This looks like this is a track here. And, at least I can sit there, you can sit there and say, well, there is something there, but let's do a circumference of where that trackway is. If there's supposed to be 48 steps between those, are roughly fairly large 4-foot distances between tracks, and see if there's anything there. I know that what we try to do anyways is if we get an encounter, someone phones us, we had an encounter. We go meet them. Where was the encounter? Well, it was over there behind the barn. We don't go to the barn. What we do is we go around the perimeter and we work in towards where the evidence is. Same way as that snow, we excavate things. And I want to just, Wizard Andrews asked me about that. He said he tried that technique a few times. Well, the Inuvik have about, I think, over 100 different words for snow. And so that technique will work if the conditions are right. We'd have to use a different technique, because if it's all very flaky snow and it's all the way down there, the snow hasn't had a chance to pack itself down. You're not going to get to the bottom where there's going to be a track, because it's going to be too fluffy. You know what I mean?
Right.
And but that's why, like when we did those excavation of those tracks, it was 7 days afterwards. Those are conditions when we were doing it, by the way. But what you could see is that it had a chance to do what that snow would do to help us find to see whether or not it's actually a Sasquatch or not. But that's a hard thing to do because I mean, the good thing about Tristan and Brent and these guys, they're a lot younger than us.
Yeah,
That's to what you're
yeah,
talking about too. I think we're doing a disservice to everybody who has seen a Sasquatch because the Kool-Aid drinking and the narration is not helping any of you guys move forward
not at all.
because you're not giving you anything so that you can put an answer to your question of you helping you see it again so you can do a. I mean, you've been thinking this over for 3 years now since the incident happened with you.
Pretty
Man, if you
close.
could see, it would fill in a lot of those questions that your brain with intent has been trying to solve for the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't give you all the information, but it gives you your information that you need. And so
Yeah,
I think it's really important that people just relax and understand that it'll take you a while to understand what it means to be in the bush again. And if you
yeah,
can't get into the bush with the rhythm of the bush, that means you're carrying Western technical Western culture into the forest, which means that you're already confirmationally biased in regards to how you perceive things, your basic powers, how you see things, and how you hear things. Then you throw the topic of Sasquatch on top of that, and it's hard for the brain, not you, but your brain's going to, because you told it with intent, I'm looking for Sasquatch. So it's going to try to help you look
yeah.
for it. The problem is that the brain doesn't have any
Doesn't
information.
know
Like
what
you
it's
said,
looking for. That's right.
yeah. And
Yeah,
the way of seeing a Sasquatch, it's not that you're sitting here saying, "Oh," and backtracking and saying, "Well, I don't know if I saw a Sasquatch or not," because you always stick solid with, "I don't know what I saw." That's the key part.
yeah,
It would be categoried, I think, if I ran into one, it would look like a Sasquatch. Right?
yeah.
Mine was a toddler Sasquatch. I mean, where's your reference point for that? Know
Right,
where
right.
to go with it, right? So I don't look at that as something that makes me think I'm going to go. I mean, it would be grand if I could find another toddler Sasquatch in the back of the
Yeah.
moose and I can say, here's a
That's,
video of it.
yeah. And I mean, to be honest, if somebody were to ask me genuinely out of curiosity, to be truthful, if somebody says, "Have you ever seen a Bigfoot?" Then to be truthful, I'm going to say yes, because I don't have anything else to say other than, I mean, I could say, "Well, I think I have," which is true. I think I have. I think that's what Rasta is. I think he is a Sasquatch. But can I prove that he's a Sasquatch? And as I was saying before, it's not so much can I prove it to other people. Can I prove it to myself that was a Sasquatch? You know,
Yeah.
I got a couple of
Uh,
comments I'd like to go over here. Grasshopper earlier said, and I tend to, I don't have any problem with this comment. Not enough giant people to account for all the tracks found in random places in the deep woods. And I would tend to agree with that. I mean, there's not enough giant people with flat feet to account for everything, right? I would agree with that. I would say pretty much the same thing. And Kaiju down here said, again, he said again, there are no experts in the subject, and that includes all aspects of it, which we're all agreed upon there. But we can also be agreed upon, though, Kaiju, that there are people that have an expertise in a certain thing that could be applied to the investigation.
or
So it's not
helpful.
that they're that, and I know that Kaiju understands what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there are people that have certain expertise in things that can be applied when you're going to. Not that they're an expert in Bigfoot, but they're an expert in a certain area that may be applied to the investigation of it. Um, so I think we all know that. So anything else?
Well, I want to
Mm,
answer Kaiju's thing about he asked me, Leon, why is there the woo side of Bigfoot?
oh, I
Let me,
totally missed that. But go ahead.
it's just not Bigfoot. The woo is in anything that is unknown, that's a belief system, and you don't have answers for. And what the brain does is think of it. If you're looking for a Sasquatch, everyone that's on here looking for a Sasquatch, your brain is interested in Sasquatch. So what the brain does is it looks for it. Here's the narration of other people who've experienced Sasquatch, and it starts formulating because it's trying to help you bring that to the frontal cortex to let you know this is the theories about Sasquatch. Mind speaking, they're a type of tribe or like people, UFO, Sasquatches, all these kind of things. And again, every time you have an idea up here, that what the woo is explaining, or is your brain fabricating ideas onto the topic, but but it doesn't validate the topic information. So what the brain does is it gives you all sorts of other concepts and ideas. And unfortunately, some people, it becomes a belief system. And how it becomes a belief system is it becomes a active community. You could say an active community. That's probably a better way of saying it. Where you start meeting people, other people. You start talking to people who are online who are fairly popular. You meet some good people. Now, the problem with the brain is the brain really has a hard time with knowing, because it has this like a feedback loop. Is so I meet Christopher Noel when I got started. Oh my God, he's got 15,000 views. What do I have? I got nothing. I don't know nothing. I meet Matt Moneymaker. He's got TV shows on it. Now, the problem with my brain is because there's numbers and these people follow them and they're telling me to follow him. I think I should be I could follow them. But what I'm not asking myself is, are they providing any data that actually help me move forward? Or are they just narrating an idea? The problem with this space up here, this is kind of your spiritual imaginational part. Whenever you try to think of anything unknown, it goes to your imagination. What the hell was that? I don't know what that is. And so then your brain starts trying to figure out what that is. And this is where people get stuck in their PTSD is if you had a really intense experience of the unknown, your brain's still in that up here. And then if you come online and people are saying to you, cults are terrible for this. If you are really broken, come from a very broken family, and don't have many friends, you're a perfect target for a person in the cults. And the other thing is the cult's been around for a few hundred years. So the cult has all the answers 3 levels deep to what the general population would ask in regards to the doubt they might have as a general person. But because of your deficit of your sense of self, you don't have community, you don't have a connection, but you get involved with a cult. They seem sincere because you're sincere. You think they carry the same sincerity, meaning your best interest. But as you get more involved in the cult, after years go on, you start realizing there's something wrong. I'm giving more than I'm getting back. They're not helping me move forward. Matter of fact, I start having fear and anxiety. But the drawback is you also have these feedback loops. You get community, you get friends, you get an income through the cult. But you don't understand that it's all damaging to yourself. And that when it comes to the woo, that's why as far as when I deal with certain people, like I'm seeing people's stories online, I know the difference between somebody who has a delusional style of thinking that's not, and I'm not saying that a negative thing. When we talk about disorders, what it means is something is not orderly. And nor does the person have the capacity to manage, to look at things in a structured way to help them free them of whatever this disorder happens to do. And that's what therapy is supposed to help you with, and sometimes meds. But the problem with it is once it becomes delusional, like Christopher Noel, in my opinion, like you said earlier, I think that he cannot back off because he's got himself in a corner. And usually what will happen is if you come against anybody that's got a wrong belief system, that they're cherishing it to the level of a sacred cow because it's their whole emotional structure, their psychological structure, the emotional structure. They put narration on it. That's the woo of what they think is going on instead of knowing what's going on. It's very confusing in life if you don't know what's going on, but people are chronically saying to you or telling you what's going on. That's supposed to happen between 3 to 9 years old or even 13 years old, because you're still negotiating. And if you have trusting regulators, trusting parents that you can bounce ideas off to, then what happens is you become pretty confident in your own capacity to see what you see, know what you know, hear what you hear, and fair with yourself and flexible to say that I was wrong about that. If you don't have that and you get into any kind of topic that's unknown, you're very open because, you're sincere. When I asked those 8 questions at the conference, I asked everybody, How many believe that you're sincere? How many believe that you're honest? How many believe that you're fairly intelligent? And and everyone put up their hand. I said, now your spouses might not think that you're fairly intelligent, but I buy everything you're saying. I think you're honest, sincere people, right? Now, if you're an honest, sincere person because you want to be, you don't like to be scabbed by other people. And I asked that question too. How many of you have been taken advantage by people who you thought had your best interest? But all those positives you would know about yourself, that I truly believe that most everybody in chat is like that. That's where the setup happens in regards to your brain, because you think other people are going to be that way. And it's going to take you a while to realize you're going to start sniffing there's something wrong with what they're saying, or it's not quite helping you move forward. And so for me to have to go and say, I don't buy structures or Sasquatch at all, I didn't just flippantly come up with the idea. I had to do the research. I found out, I talked to the loggers, I talked to the hunters, I talked to the First Nations people, found out it's the actual First Nations families who are coming, training the next generation on their tradition of bushcraft. And then I started to reach even farther out from that. And that's what you want to do. A good researcher wants to have a multi-pronged approach to anything you're looking at. But the problem is, and I think Trackway helped me with this the other day. I think it was Trackway who was online. I think I'm going to do up some videos. I'm going to try to do some videos when my energy levels up about the difference between when an idea that one investigates turns into a system, and then that system turns into their belief system. Because once it turns into a belief system, which means it's a cultural, you could say a new community that rises up in the Canadian culture or Sasquatch culture. Like, it's interesting to watch how the dogman traditions, now it's turning into a tradition of the story of the narration of what a dogman is. And then ask yourself, when was the first time anyone talked about dogman? Where did that come in to the system? But you can see that the woo part, the ideological ideas and concepts without the facts, but the narration gives you a feedback loop in your dopamine system, as dopamine in your system. When you think, oh, that's a neat idea, oh, that's very interesting. That's very interesting doesn't mean that what you're hearing the person say that sounds very interesting, that's chemically giving you a bit of a buzz going on because it sounds like an interesting idea. Interesting ideas do that. I get that a lot from people. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, but I'm still having to find out whether or not it's truthful or not. And again, just going back, I'll shut up after this. But again, it's going to be hard, Tristan, because the key part is no one wants to spend the time in regards to doing what's needed that they really need to do. What do I mean by that? People don't do the things they need to do just for themselves to combat their thoughts in their head with emotions attached to judgment, accusation, negative declaration, condemnation, and guilt. It's like, why are you carrying that? That's the right question for that one. Why are you beating yourself up? 95% of everything you picked up in your brain, you picked up like a sponge. If you have a sponge, which is your brain, and a glass of water that's clear, that's Sasquatch, and then you start putting food coloring in for different topics, ideas, the woo, ESP, zapping, UFOs, that water turns mucky. It's no longer clear anymore. Gets you more confused because of the options. And then the system makes you think that you have to be fair to all these other ideas. And then your brain comes up, which is a sponge. And if you put that liquid into a container, now that water, that's how much heat, and you put the sponge into it, what happens to the liquid? It automatically is absorbed into the brain. Now it's in your head, all these different ideas. You got different schools, I won't call them schools, opinions about what Sasquatches are. Depending on where it is, you're going to get bucked if you start asking all these different questions, because those schools are going to come at you, or those ideas, those groups of people who believe those things are going to come at you. And because they don't have conflict resolution, which most people don't, they're afraid of conflict. And their cognitive bias, which is what we all have in regards to formulating any idea, turns to this cognitive dissonance where there's an emotional reaction to when they come across somebody like me who asks the right questions, and they feel awkward in their body, uncomfortable. We got to get over that. That is subjective looking at evidence, not objective. If somebody comes up to me and says, my God, Leon, you're not going to believe this. I saw a Sasquatch. He was riding a tricycle. He had a beer in one hand and a ukulele, and he was playing it at the same time. Okay, that kind of sounds out there, but I've had a lot of stories in my life, in my profession, where the stories are out there. You know, when the story's out there, how do you learn to vet it, whether it's factual or not? Like when you talked about Christopher Noel, first question you ask him is exactly what anyone would ask him: did you take it to a wildlife specialist? His response, using distance language, his response to you was, well, you think that they're actually going to
Listen,
believe in Sasquatch? We're not, the topic isn't Sasquatch yet, Christopher. The
yeah.
topic is what you're
What
looking
is it?
at. Why would a 7 to 8 foot Sasquatch climb a 10-foot apple tree when it could stand, that's 8 inches around the trunk? Why wouldn't he just stand underneath it? He could pick every bloody apple off the fucking apple tree, you know, like,
Right.
but again, to watch people's brains. Look, there's some people out there that there's no use having a discussion with. We're not looking for those people. We're trying to get a soil out here or a landscape out here where, you know, Tristan and Brant and Alex from Small Monsters, Justin from Mountain Beast Mysteries, Keenan, all these younger guys, so that it's a fair thing. And it is coming. And the reason why you want this type of talk going on is because the system is like a pot. The pot starts simmering because it's giving this energy of people challenging the old way. You know, it's pretty hard
Yeah.
to change a custom
Yeah.
ideology of a system because it's very threatening to all these people. You know, like I was really worried at Merit there. You know, like majority of everyone was going to be really into the woo. I was pleasantly pleased to see that they were open to wanting to know good, solid stuff, and that's what we're trying to do: is provide good, solid stuff, not rag on people. You have to educate people. It's not good enough that we're right about our position. We have to be effective in educating people to help them see what we're talking about, understand from their inside out what we're talking about. That's the center part we're not getting a lot online. Just narration. Please, for God's sake, tell me how you know that. So if Tristan was out with me and we came across tree snaps, he said, "Well, Liam, well, look, this looks like Sasquatch. Look at all these trees. They're evenly spaced and they're all busted off the top there." And I said, "Yeah, that's that particular example is a hunter goes in, finds an area, he busts the trees so he knows where to go to because he doesn't have any ribbon with him or he doesn't have a way to mark the trail with him." And there's a whole bunch of other reasons it could be. We don't go right to it's a Sasquatch. We want to prove it's not, because if it's not, then I'm stuck with the real interesting question that I want to be curious about. You know, why are all these trees buds nipped off here? Well, if you don't know the forest very well, you might think, well, Sasquatch might be grooming him. Well, no, they're deer. What happens when you come across one that looks almost similar to that, but it's way high up? The top's been busted over onto the other side. Now, something had to pick it up and bend it over to the other side. It doesn't make any sense. And it's all woven together. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense is kind of the curious part we like about things. We want to find out what makes sense. But this isn't even Sasquatch. Let's see where it goes. It could go anywhere, you know. It could be, who knows? Maybe a porcupine did it. I don't know.
That's what I say a lot of, Leon. It's like you can't just. It's like Bigfoot of the gaps, man.
Well,
Just because it's like, well, I can't explain this any other way, so therefore it's got to be Bigfoot. Well, no, that's not the way it works. We have some good comments here in the thing that I just wanted to respond to. Kevin says made a comment that sometimes a scientific orthodoxy becomes a belief in itself, and that orthodox belief is wielded as a sword without bearing in mind the assumptions which may or may not be justified. And I don't have anything to say about whether that's the case with scientific orthodoxy or not. But I will say that with the last part, without bearing in mind the assumptions which may or may not be justified, well, if you have nothing to justify your assumption, in other words, you have nothing to base upon that assumption. If it's I mean, that makes sense. Why give consideration to something that can't be justified for any reason? So that's all I'd have to say about that one.
Well, the thing is that's the scientific method, though. when something, orthodoxy is the idea that something now becomes so-called truth or solid in any kind of system. Just give me a second.
Oh, and I'd like to say, Kevin, I mean, I understand you understand what the scientific method is, I'm sure, but that is the thing. I just don't, if it's not justified, why even look at it? That's the same thing. I mean, science would be more on board, the scientific community would be more on board if we could give them what they would consider justifiable reason to investigate Bigfoot. Some of them have. We got to keep in mind that we're not saying this is the complete and utter entire scientific community that's refused to look into it, because we know that's not true. There's at least a handful of scientists that will look into it because of that. But if you don't have a justifiable reason to actually look at something and try to test it or whatever, then you shouldn't give it any consideration. In my thoughts. Go ahead, Leon. You wanted to respond to.
Well, I just want to just add a bit. And the idea about it is, okay, this is going to piss people off in the science community if you're researching anything and you've got grants for millions of dollars, and then some 14-year-old genius in a back farm someplace has a capacity to look at everything from a neutral position, comes up with a better strategy than what you came up with, that and is going to come against it. Well, the science community might be able to sit there and say, well, he's only a 14-year-old kid. But if that kid is right, it's going to be in their face. And if people start looking at what this kid's actually saying, which there are a few people that are kind of like, what are they called? A little gifted, but that's not the word I'm looking for. The idea is, look, if your whole life has been also financially structured and shored up internally with yourself in regards to your scientific, whatever it happens to be you're believing, then what ends up happening is the truth will set you free, but first it's going to piss you off because you don't want to be wrong. Now, there's a different ways of being wrong that doesn't have to piss you off if you're flexible. If somebody presents this, what a healthy skeptic is. A healthy skeptic is when good, solid evidence comes that outweighs the evidence I had prior, I can bend the knee to it and say, good call, good catch. Thanks for teaching me, because it's about education. Online, again, because it's turned into a culture, we're no longer just dealing with a topic, we're dealing with a culture narrative that's kind of cascading down onto the topic. And if you're coming online and you're new, it's going to be very hard for anyone new to try to figure out, well, what's the truth about all this shit? What should I believe? Who should I believe? Who should I follow? Is anybody giving you anything, including me? I mean, including me saying it twice, meaning that, look, I want to find one. Teach me how to find one. I'm trying to teach me how to find one. And if you come up with a better way of finding one so I can film it, maybe study it, then I can get that information to the people that we're all sitting here, well, science doesn't want to do it. Well, God, I mean, most of us, again, just go over your brain over the last, if you guys have been online for a while, think of how many people have just left the community because of the toxicity of them trying to convince us that what they're saying has any validity. They can't. And it's frustrating, and it's damaging to the topic. And now because it's becoming more of a cultural idea of Sasquatch, especially for small towns to have their Bigfoot festivals, then the idea gets more mockery as time moves forward. But no one's showing us another Gimlin film. No one's coming across a body part. No one's coming across any of this kind of stuff. We all have ideas about it. That's nice, but that's not the scientific method. That's apophenia. That's our imagination of what we think might be going on. But we're not vetting it. We're just taking it as if it is solid. Tree structures, snap trees, Sasquatch nests. Yeah, we put all sorts of narration on everything we find. But it doesn't mean, how do you know? All the tests, from what I can tell in regards to all the DNA tests done for so-called Sasquatch nests, none of them are proven to be human. Or Sasquatch, proven there's this other DNA there that's there. Kathy Strain was the one who, again, these people who are overhearing these other people who have, ideas. Well, what do you think about these Sasquatch, or these things that look like nests? Do you think they're from Sasquatch? I don't know. Maybe. That's what they said.
And maybe went from definitely.
to yes, it is. This is the
Yeah.
cultural issue because
Yeah.
people are so desperate. Well, I want to change that. People aren't so desperate. The brain is so efficiently desperate sometimes to try to give you the answer to your wonderment question. Problem
Mhm.
is, it might be not correct. So if you've had an experience with Sasquatch and you have PTSD because of the functional event, the brain, that's why you're getting haunted every day. It's not a day like Jay says. You know, he's 72, I think. Think of it. It happened when he's 19. You're talking
Yeah.
60 years, not a day going by, 60 years, 50, even 50 years, not a day going by with a question. What the hell was that?
Yeah. What was that? Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and,
And then seeing
and
all this stuff, which indicates to you that it's probably a Sasquatch that you saw, but then you have all this added baggage narrative that's not proven. You know, that's the thing, man. Is I think that's a large part of it with me too. Is that the thing about being wrong? Because if I am wrong, I want to know that I'm wrong. Why? Because I don't want to go through life thinking that I saw a fucking Sasquatch if that's not what it was. You know, I
well, it's also
don't
going to be
want.
harder too because a person can make a statement, and if you're interested in truth, it's going to take you 10 times to 100 times the amount of energy to prove them wrong. Where
Yeah,
they should be proving themselves wrong, so you don't have to do that process
yeah,
because they have, you should
yeah,
stand on its own. So you can make all sorts of claims. You know, there's lots of people online making all sorts of ridiculous claims. It's not even about Bigfoot, just other things, and they
yeah,
got a huge viewer subscription. And you know, it was funny when I was up and I was talking about cautionary note about doing research online, and I pulled up a YouTube. All the thumbnails that are on YouTube took a screenshot of that. And it happened to be on the bottom left-hand corner a picture of a Sasquatch. And then I said, notice where your brain goes when you're looking at all these topics. You're looking for the topic that's your clickbait to try to get you to hit on their videos. And then look at the amount of views. And on the Sasquatch video, it was more than all the other ones, including Donald Trump in his town hall meeting. 1.4 million people watched that video. And I said,
yeah.
and you're interested in Sasquatch, you guys, which video are you going to click on? Well, that one. Why?
Right.
Because 1.4 million views. There must be
Yeah.
something there. Well, there
There
is. It's
must
a lie.
be.
It's a scab. The guy's a scab, and he's trying to make you believe what he's presenting. And I broke it down. I was amazed at how many people, and it was Dyer's Sasquatch in the freezer thing. I'm
Freezer.
thinking,
Yeah.
you have 300 and some people in front of you, and most of them, they don't know it's not a hoax, which just
Right.
tells me again that it'll take time. If you're on the right track of something, you will get bucked. That's just a normal process. You'll get bucked if we're doing our job lesser, like are more effectively as time moves forward, because the system now they're going to all react. All these people who have been hoaxing us, or even if they don't think they're hoaxing us and they're delusional about it, they're going to have a hell of a time because it is slowly coming where people are asking the right specific questions. Thomas at that conference, he stood up and asked every speaker one question. And it was funny. The speakers would always go to everybody else. Thomas just kept his hand up right to the last question until he got answered. And he said, do you believe that they're zoological? In other words, you think they're natural to nature? And even some of the ones who were saying, well, using woo terminology, they all at the very end, because Thomas asked them point blank, no, I think they're natural creatures. I don't think they're not natural creatures, because they know they're, like if you ask the right question, there's not a single species on the planet that we thought once was supernatural ended up being supernatural, having supernatural abilities, or not a single creature on the planet. They have their own techniques to make them. Again, if you didn't have science, like everyone today has a hell of a lot more knowledge than people 2,000 years ago, a
Yeah.
1,000 years, 500
Yeah.
years ago. We have more knowledge than most people, but they couldn't write, they couldn't read.
Well, yeah.
That's
I
why,
mean, you could even go even 200 years ago.
yeah.
You
And so
know.
you're bound by these trusting these so-called authority figures, whether it be the church or the king or whatever like that. But you could never question them
Right.
because they have an authority position over you. somebody who's been online for a lot of viewers and that they have an authority position over you should listen to what we're saying. I think you're just jealous. I'm not jealous.
Yeah.
I'm just asking the question. How do you know that's a Sasquatch? That evidence is a Sasquatch.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what you see is the squirming of these people not knowing, and that's what we want, Joe. We
Yeah.
want them to squirm. We want to,
Well,
like
I
you're talking.
do in a way. I gotta agree with you on that because it's like I mean, for example, today it's like I was going through, looking through YouTube, and I come across one that somebody took. It's a short, and it has to do with what's his name? Sasquatch, Ontario. Mike Peterson. Um, with his Bigfoot noises. Oh, flower fart. Oh, and Mike, and
Yeah.
yeah, and you'd be surprised at how many comments there were on that. That's oh yes, this is so real. This is actually what it is. He's so legit, very very legit. And I'm like, no, he's not. He's a freaking hoaxer and a charlatan, man.
Yeah.
And it's like I can't do this forever. I'm not going to be able to do this forever. And I just kind of hope that in some way, you know, I guess that's why I'm still doing this instead of walking completely away from it like I was considering on doing. I mean, not the subject completely, but all this stuff online. Um, and I guess that's one of the reasons why I haven't, because I'm hoping that at least because I can't, I'm not going to realistically be able to keep doing this indefinitely. I want, like you mentioned, those younger guys like Kaiju and Brent and all the ones that are still capable that are younger. I'm hoping to pass on something, some way of thinking about this that stays true to the actual investigation of it and not, falling into the pop culture Bigfoot stuff that is unproven, unfalsifiable, and etc. Because there's really something out there, man. And I'm hoping I can pass that on. And all I can do is I can't stop. I'm not going to stop those people like those people in that thing by saying, "Oh yes, this is all true. This is all real. This is blah blah blah." I'm not going to be able to do anything to change those people. But when I have an opinion on something like the the Christopher Noels of the world, or the woo that say that all this mystical, magical, unproven, supernatural stuff. I mean, that's all I can do is push back against that and go, why? Show me, give me something. Otherwise, you've given me no reason to believe it, right?
Well,
You know,
you're not saying
and
those questions to those people to give them validity. What you're doing is asking the right questions so the people in the chat can see that's a fair question and the right question. What you want to
mhm,
see, what the people in the chat to witness is somebody uh, on the hot seat, because they're not going to give an answer. They're going to give a politician answer. They're going to say all sorts of stuff. Dun, 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 fancy words,
yeah,
50-cent words, scientific stuff. They have no idea what they're talking about. I'm sorry to say this, not really. Quantum Sasquatch with Ron Moorhead is garbage. How do you know that, Leon? I'll tell you what. You take his book to any PhD at your local university or college in quantum physics and say, "What do you think of this perspective?" And pay the guy $100 for his time, and you'll get
yeah,
the answer.
yeah.
That's the woo. The woo is a tossed salad approach, or what do you guys call it in the States? So I don't get nailed for being,
Word
you
salad,
know, word salad is a
word
word
salad.
salad. Sounds really good. Like I sent you a video with Sam Harris
Word salad.
and Deepak Chopra or whatever like that, and he's just doing a word salad. And Mike Sherman says, "There's a perfect example of the woo. Sounds really good. titillates your thinking neural net pathway, but there's no substance to it.
Right.
And he said, well, don't tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about. You're talking to MIT. And then, of course, this actual PhD uh, uh, physics guy came up and he said, everything you're saying is not true. And they're going, but he has to come back because it is in a live audience. He has to respond to it. That's called conflict of ideas. But in conflict, you learn conflict resolution to get the best ideas if people are fair. And
Yeah.
that's what people aren't used to doing. If you're in a fight with your significant other, it's no longer about whatever the topic was. It's about how you feel, and you're trying to get your point across to them, and how they feel, and they're trying to get you to understand them. The topic has got nothing to do with what the problem was. You left the dishes in the sink. It has to do with your emotions of trying to get yourself emotionally back so there's no conflict anymore. Instead of working through conflict so you let go of conflict, instead of walking away because it's not work for you, and you're fuming for the next 5 days about the person's behavior. It's,
Yeah.
and that takes time. It's not that people are stupid. It's just that, man, I tell you, I
No.
have to admit, we are pretty
Some people.
naive in regards to how the brain works, and how we work. And it takes some education on our parts to be curious about, what am I lacking? What can I do to increase my inability to make it more ability? Who can I connect up with that's better than I am in this area? Not claiming, again, somebody was talking at the conference there about, well, yeah, I talked to this crypto linguistics. Okay, go on here and type in crypto linguistics. See if there is such a thing.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a crypto linguistics. Well, they're very hard to find. That's because they're not real. There's somebody who put a shingle themselves saying, I'm a crypto linguist. Hey, you guys, by the way, I want to let you know I'm a psychic fairy from planet Zoron. Just Google it. It's right online. You're not going to find anything other than Leon's crazy, after that. Because that's the thing, is the narration, because we are good people, we're trusting people, we're honest people, we're fairly intelligent. That's the setup when we come online, because we think other people are trying to help us. Why? Because we're curious. So we have this force going out to be educated, but the problem is the people out there trying to educate us don't have enough character, because what you say is directly connected to your character. They don't have enough character because they're not solid. That's what tells us they don't have enough character for our best interest to help us move this forward. We will be here in 50 years. Different woo stuff, but we'll be here in 50 years.
And Jerry just joined us from the Book Lost crew of BC, and his question was, he says, "But why do the public think we are nuts and or slash oddballs? Ghost hunters are not thought to be nuts. Even cult members are not thought to be nuts." My answer to that, Jerry, is, well, I did put forth some examples of why the public thinks we're nuts. Most of it is because of all this unfounded, unscientific blather about Bigfoot, what it is, what it does, all the capable magical shit that it's capable of, etc. That's one reason. The thing about ghost hunters are not thought to be nuts, that depends on who you talk to. And one of the reasons why that is mostly, I will agree with you, that's probably more accepted, ghost hunters, but that is only because there is a good majority of people, not atheists, although some atheists, atheism is just what it says. It is a non-acceptance of the God claim. That's all that is. Some atheists do believe in ghosts and etc. I personally, I don't believe in ghosts. Now, I wouldn't necessarily call people that are ghost hunters nuts. They're curious. I got nothing against that. But I would need to see a ghost. I would need to have something before I would buy into that. But mostly that's because. But anyway, I digress. Molly distracted me with what she said in the background. But mostly, the reason why the ghost thing is because most people will accept, or a good majority of people, let's say, I can't say most, a good majority of people accept that everybody has a soul. That soul goes somewhere, therefore there can be ghosts. That's why they don't believe ghost hunters are nuts. because they believe that it's at least possible for ghosts. I don't. I have no scientific evidence that the consciousness is capable of existing outside of this physical body. The consciousness, or what people would generally call a soul, the consciousness is an emergent property of the brain, and without the brain to generate that emergent property, there's nothing there. So that's why I don't buy into the ghost thing. But lots of people believe in ghosts. And I don't fault them for that if they think they've seen a ghost. I won't tell them, no, you definitely didn't see a ghost because I wasn't there. I don't have to believe they did because of the way I believe that ghosts are not possible. But there's that. And I'm not even sure I'm qualified to talk about cult members or not thought to be nuts because there's plenty of cult members I thought were nuts. So you got to
Well, the thing is,
answer
if
for
you're
that.
in a cult, if you're in a cult, you don't think you're in a cult. That's the thing is because the building blocks of the narration you heard from the cult answer those three questions you might have, and the problem with this is that we're like toddlers, the Santa doesn't exist. Well, you can't say that to a kid. So you say, well, you've been a good kid this year. I think you'll get presents. I didn't lie to them, but I'm letting them have their childhood, which is magical, and they can still believe what they're going to believe because I know that most everybody grows out of believing that Santa's doesn't exist, kind of thing. The key part, one sec here. The key part is when you are looking at any topic and you're curious. Most people into ghosts and stuff like that is because they're just curious. This is why that phrase, like I mentioned before, about they have to say for entertainment purposes. It's the same way with people who go and listen to psychics. They have to say by law for entertainment purposes. Why? Because 100 and some years ago, people used to buy that was actually happening. It's been tested 1,000 times different ways, and it's garbage. And that phrase legally is to protect the general population, so you don't get sucked in. We don't have that on YouTube, Bigfoot thing. You know,
Uh,
I know there's a certain channels that would be fair and probably say I would put that on there. This is for entertainment purposes, in regards to listening to stories about Sasquatch and stuff. But the other stuff is just garbage. Over to you because Leanna's just stopped in here. I have to help her get something into the back. So back to
okay.
you.
Well, I'm
Hey,
going to
Jerry.
answer this question or try to with the Bat
Sure.
Mom. Bat Mom says, it seems you're constantly upset with people saying things that are not scientific evidence, but what can you do to change those people? I don't know if I can answer this question. I'll try to. I'm first of all, I'm not constantly upset. Upset's not. I'm befuddled and frustrated is more apt with about the when it comes to that mom. But what can you do to change those people? Well, as I mentioned, there's people out there. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's nothing I can do to change them, and that's not who I'm trying to change, really, when it comes down to it. Um, I'm really trying to just give people what I think is real, man, a real way to look at this. Um, and I mean, that's all I can say. You know, yeah, I mean, I understand there's sometimes I can seem like I'm pretty heated, yeah, but it's frustration really more than anything else. Bat mom. But as far as changing, yeah, no, I'm not like envisioning changing everybody that believes that everything that Christopher Noel says or Zasky or anybody that I personally just do not find credible in this because they're just not giving me any reason to accept what they're saying. Um, so, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question well enough or not, but yeah, I'm not trying to change people. I'm just giving other people that may not be as familiar with all this stuff a way to look at this and and find out what's really going on here. You know, and not just a bunch of pop culture, you know, this is what I say and I've said it, so therefore you must believe it type thing. Um, so I don't know. Hopefully that kind of answered your question, I guess. But yeah, so um, I don't know, guys. It's like that's the deal, man. Um, and I know, again, as I said, I get a little heated sometimes, but it's just that I get tired of seeing this stuff where people are just trying to blow smoke up somebody's butt. And it's like, as I always say, if I am wrong, and I'm prepared to be wrong, and if what I encountered out there is not, and I can prove that it's not, then that's fine. That means I was wrong about what I saw, but at least I don't have to go through life thinking something was true when it wasn't. And you know, when it comes to, yeah, I understand that. Bat Mom, she says, just don't want to waste our time with being frustrated over something we can't change. Bringing light to it is different. The frustration will turn toxic. And it can. I agree with you. I agree with you on that. Probably could. Um, but yeah, I just want to know what's real out there, man. Um, and I have chosen the only method that I know of that can take me, that is a path to that, and that is the scientific method. Even if I don't quite, and I'll admit that I'm not fully versed or knowledgeable about everything about the scientific method, etc., but I do know basics of what it is, and I got to try to stick to that, to explain some of these things for myself, at least. And hopefully it'll explain things for some other people too. But I have to go with that. So when I say that people need to come up with scientific evidence, then because in my experience, that has led to more of what's real than anything else I've experienced in my life. Is that science can answer questions, at least about the naturalistic world, which I believe, because of evidence, is the only thing that exists. Nothing else has been proven with a preponderance of evidence to be real. So I have to go by that. Um, yeah, I just, so anything else to add there, Leon?
Well, the idea is that look
That
at
was a bunch
one.
of fucking word salad too, I think. I don't know. I don't know if I
Well,
was making myself clear with
you-
that.
no, I think the thing too. There's two thoughts. One thing is, yeah, we can harp on all this because of our frustration, but we also have to provide something to give people so they can do the opposite of what we're talking about. The frustration part is we can't give them anything because everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid narration of it, and everyone's giving the Kool-Aid narration of it online that we can't provide anything solid for anybody else. So that's very frustrating as well.
That
And
is too.
and so and that's what I mean. I think that like where you're at, that's when so many people, like even Bigfoot Tony, why you want to know what things are real is because it helps you stay in reality, in your own psyche. If your brain is not solid at getting data, then it goes to the woo. And what the woo actually in clinical terms is using, it's kind of like when you say uh, God's at the gap kind of idea. The woo fills in the answer to the question. It doesn't, but that's what we believe. Uh, by using a supernatural terminology to say that this is the answers. Maybe these are what the answers are. Now it should be a maybe, not a definite, right? And that's the thing is that people jump from just a maybe to it is. Like I'm doing a documentary with a guy right now, or be doing a documentary coming up here on life after death experiences and stuff. From a guy who dropped it 9 times, I have certain angles on it that most people probably
Right.
won't. But the truth of the matter is there something after life? Now, I don't know. I know that if you ask certain questions to yourself, do you guys ever remember never not existing? If I ask that right now to you guys and everyone in the chat, do you guys ever have a sense that you've never not existed? Now, we know we're born. So as I ask that question, you've always felt being alive, being. You've always felt being. So the idea of after death is that sense that you have as being, which some people use as the definition for the soul or your spirit or whatever, it goes on. Okay, well, there's a lot of other angles you can look at that whole scenario. So if you have a soul that's complete and can move on, what happens to people with brain injury that have injured brains? The brain doesn't keep it together. In other words, the part that's missing in your brain that's now damaged that was available before, if you're consciously able to think and analyze things, is not available to you. So, and if you want to take it to the theological side in regards to, especially the Old Testament, the spirit is God's breath of life into a living thing. It's not this thing that continues on. The Jewish community doesn't believe that. It's about God's breath was breathed into mankind to move on. And again, this is where things start getting really complicated, because you have other people who are spiritual, feel like they're spiritual people, feel like they're being led by God. They start putting these narratives on, but you can't tangibly check it. And that's what's so frustrating is, I don't care what you come up with, but give me something tangible I can get my teeth into. Give me some type of meat and potatoes. And
Yeah.
like you, I had to, when I was speaking at the Merit conference, I had to somehow put a thread through a needle to an audience of 300 people where I wasn't offending anybody. And the technique I chose was to ask them questions as points. How are you going to trust this? How are you going to know which one to look at? They're all question forms. Now they're stuck with those questions because their brains are like sponges. They've heard Leon say that. So down the road, they're going to hear that in their head. How do you know? How do you know? How do you know? Like you said, Joe, that Margaret ones that I say, or Thomas would say, is stick to facts, don't deviate from the facts. That sticks in your head. Do you want to know what you're looking at, or don't you want to know what you're looking at? Again, when I was speaking to Merritt, I said, how many of you have been burned by people who you thought you could trust? Won't put up their hand. So my whole talk's about when you're online, how are you going to trust the information you're getting? How are you going to know how to trust? I'm not giving them the answer for that. I'll do that another time. But what we're trying to do is to get people to think differently. And that's the important part. It's not that we even have the answers, and that's the frustrating part. Is especially, I think we're doing a disservice to people who have PTSD because of an encounter, of not giving them anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, Joe, the reason why you're not seeing a Sasquatch is you're not eating lollipops, because I know for a fact that Sasquatch love lollipops, and they're a symbolic sign of the religious faith they have, that you're a trustworthy human being. Because in our past history, Sasquatches have told me, because in my mind, that when they first met man offered them a lollipop. And the first man that they offered the lollipop to, the Sasquatch, happened to be a fair, trusting man. But mankind has changed now. Mankind has become evil. And now how am I going to prove any of those 15 claims they just stated there?
Right.
Right?
Well, even if you want to put it even simpler, state it in a simpler way, it's like telling me that, the reason why you haven't seen another Sasquatch or seen Rasta again is because your heart's not pure when you go into the woods.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. And I've heard that type of thing, but
totally, yeah. Well, that was the kind of curious thing. I know we're going to get going, but I was kind of curious. I because I was on a counseling call when I was on the show with Jeff yesterday. I said to him, "Ask what's his name, Claude, if the Sasquatch speaking." I said, first of all, what's their names? But ask them if they know Matthew Johnson's mind-speaking Sasquatches. I thought that would be kind of an interesting question, because surely they must know each other, but anyways.
All right. Well, we have been miraculously on for 2 hours. It goes by so quickly sometimes.
Yeah.
But I would like to give the last word to Bruce, and before I sign off. And Bruce made the comment and said, it's like arguing with flat earthers. Occasionally kind of fun, but really mostly a waste of time.
Mhm.
And
Totally.
yeah, that's a good
Totally.
one, man. That's a good one. So, hey guys, thank you for joining me in chat. I don't know if I've given you a way to think about something in a different manner or not. If I did, great. My job here is done. But other than that, man, keep your interest. Just, think logically. Um, and just like Leon says, man, just be sure of who you're dealing with before you decide to jump onto that bandwagon and, find out who's really telling you the truth and who just seems to be like, oh, well, I just want to make up the best Bigfoot story I possibly can. So, thank you guys for listening to me, and we'll see you some other time soon. Hopefully, I'm going to get back. I'm hoping they call me about my Jeep by the end of the day. So that's it, guys. Other than that, don't sweat the petty stuff and don't sweat or pet the sweaty stuff. And we're going to be out in the forest.